Hello and welcome to the Edge of the Box podcast, a podcast by WhoScored.com in association with Oddschecker. I'm your host, Dan Bardell, joined by George Elek and Jonathan Wilson to preview another staggered Premier League game week. We did the 5 games last week, of course, and we all know there are 5 games this week as well. And we are going to start with Arsenal against Crystal Palace. But before we do that, let's exchange some pleasantries. Jonathan, are you well?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
Yep, very well, thank you. All the better for seeing you. George, haircut, George, no?
Yeah, haircut. I've also got this thing where it happens every time this time of year where I get a cold and then my lips just go bright pink. So this is always fun.
I mean,
have you got over your cold?
Yeah, cold's kind of on the way out, but it's the but this is what I pay for. So now I look like I'm wearing lipstick, which is fine.
Now you've drawn attention to it.
Yeah, it really is startling how pink it is. Yeah,
I didn't notice it before you said it, George Ellis.
Well, I'm not embarrassed. Yeah, let's get that.
You should be able to do what you want. If you want to wear lipstick,
obviously,
that's fully up to you. Yeah, you can do what you like.
I'm not, but I can.
You can if you want to. That's right. Right then, away from George's mouth, let's talk about Arsenal and Crystal Palace.
It was my nose last week. It's my mouth this week.
Yeah, I'm completely flustered by this stuff. Right then, football. Let's do some football. Mikel Arteta has never lost 4 matches in a row as Arsenal manager, Jonathan. Even in their darkest days, he didn't manage 4 defeats on the spin. There is a chance it could happen this weekend, but Crystal Palace at home does feel like a nice fixture.
Yeah, I mean, if they lose this, then there really is the beginnings of something looking slightly like it might become a crisis at Arsenal. It's an odd thing with Arteta that every season he's been at Arsenal, they've had a little run in either December or January where they've lost or failed to win 5 or 6 games in a row. And I guess it might be coincidence. It's not an enormous sample size, but I do wonder if there's something about the glut of fixtures you get at this time of year that maybe his style of management it doesn't take account of. I think he's a manager who is, and to an extent it's been forced on by the limitations of the squad, but I don't think he's keen to rotate. And I think possibly that does store up problems. So they're clearly playing nowhere near as well now as they were earlier this season. They weren't playing as well earlier this season as they were in their best periods last season. So there are issues there.
Yeah, George, Jonathan mentions the squad there. I've got to be honest, in the summer after they completed their window, I thought their squad was a bit bloated and too big, but Jonathan mentions like the reluctance to rotate there. It does feel like in certain positions they don't have many options at the moment, but like I've just said, in the summer, I felt like their squad was a little bit too big.
Yeah, maybe. But there are players who he's so reluctant to play. Like Eddie Nketiah is obviously one where even though he seems to do okay when he plays and he scored goals this season, they're clearly trying to upgrade on him. You also look at an absentee in Thomas Partey, who you look at as being in the squad in the summer, who clearly isn't available. And even across the back line, even though the squad might look bloated, it feels like there are kind of 14 players in rotation, and beyond that, no one really gets a look in. So, and I also think there's one player who no one really talks about, and I was going to talk about this later on when we talk about Martinelli, but like Granit Xhaka's have been, I think, a massive loss to this Arsenal side.
Really has.
And I know that he's his reputation maybe wasn't the best, although he did he went out in pretty good terms. I think having a left-footed ball player on the left-hand side of that midfield 3 was a massive reason why Martinelli his form has changed. Where now you've got a player in Havertz there, and Havertz and Xhaka couldn't be more different in terms of the skill sets they provide in that position. And it's not really that surprising that the player playing off the left is suddenly not in games as often and not being able to get on the ball as often. And Xhaka was someone who was a consistent performer. Yes, sometimes he'd make mistakes, and yes, he was rash at times as well. But and it's easy at this point of the season after they've I think it's 1 win in their last 7 in all competitions to mention him when we wouldn't have done 6 weeks ago. But this is where I think it's quite fairly obvious that he is someone that they're really missing in that role, and it's having an impact on other players in the squad.
Well, yeah, you can put lipstick on a pig, can't you? I've spent the last 5 minutes trying to find that quote, and I still didn't find it. I'm not even sure if I used it correctly there, but I was desperate to get it in. I think George is right about Xhaka, and Partey's been missing pretty much all season as well, Jonathan. So the midfield hasn't felt quite right. As good as Declan Rice has been, the midfield balance hasn't felt quite as good this season as maybe it did last season.
Yeah, I mean, I think when Xhaka went, I think we knew he'd played well last season. There was obviously the issue at Anfield that was he responsible for the crowd getting up there, which I sort of think that if he hadn't had the previous record he'd had with Arsenal, that wouldn't even have been an issue.
No.
But it's a case of, give a dog a bad name and
put lipstick on a pig.
Yeah. But I sort of my feeling at the time was if this is a sacrifice they need to make to be able to afford Declan Rice, it's probably worth it. But then you see how well he's played in the Bundesliga, and you sort of think some of that dynamism, some of that directness they could have done with, and given how the Havertz transfer really hasn't worked out yet, you sort of think, well, it doesn't look like that was really an upgrade. So certainly not in terms of the squad and the team dynamic. I think it's an interesting point about Martinelli's form dipping off without him, and that makes complete sense. I also think Martinelli and Saka both look knackered, and this is where
they would, wouldn't they?
I think that's where Arteta's reluctance to rotate is really. I think it damaged Arsenal last season, the last sort of 6 weeks, 2 months of last season, and I think you can see that again this season. And I sort of feel every time I'm watching Saka, I'm just waiting for him to get the injury that's going to keep him out of the Euros. It just feels he's so close to the line all the time, and he gets a treatment from opposing defenders, and I understand why Arsenal feel that maybe he's not protected as much as he should be. But he's not getting protection from his own manager, who keeps flogging him through every game.
Yeah,
and
he comes off injured, and then suddenly he's there again, starting. Like it does feel irresponsible.
And they've got Trossard, who always seems to do quite well whenever he plays. I know he's a very different type of player to Martinelli, but I do wonder if they could have used Trossard a bit more. Yeah. And then if they'd, I don't think Nketiah is really the right level. But if they had a centre forward who could play, you could then have moved Jesus out wide as well, and he could have. I mean, he can play either side to give people a bit of a break. So I think the issues really are just as they were the last couple of months of last season. They're just fatigue, but that's set in early this season. Maybe because the cumulative effect of last season, maybe because of the Champions League.
I mean, Martinelli's got the 5th worst shot conversion across the entirety of the Premier League, according to WhoScored. The worst is actually Pedro Porro on 0%. It feels there must be other players on. Wow. I mean, there isn't because they'd be in this list, but to be the only player on 0%, that feels a bit weird.
The only player who's had a shot and hasn't scored, or do you have to have a certain number of shots to be on that list?
No, it said 30 plus shots taken. It does say in the bottom left hand corner. Yeah. I'm shocked to learn Porro's taken 30 plus shots.
Oh, I'm not. Yeah, I think he said there's been games where he's had 30 shots in the first half. He's
I really like Pedro Porro.
He's the Andros Townsend of left backs.
That's a stag. I don't think I've ever seen a 0 for anything on WhoScored. So well done to Pedro Porro.
He did score in the FA Cup though, to be fair to him, didn't he?
Unbelievable.
A very good goal.
Yeah, I love him. I love Pedro Porro. I think he's absolutely fantastic, but he won't want to see those stats. That's for sure. Martinelli's actually only got 2 goals this season, George, 1 off the bench and 1 as a starter. So, we can talk as much as we like about Arsenal in front of goal, and generally that they're not as good, but it does feel like the other players have at least contributed. Saka is still scoring in the Premier League. Martinelli, it just hasn't happened for him for whatever reason this season. I know you've just gone over a few of the reasons, but do you think he'll bounce back? Do you think maybe taking out the firing line for a bit? But he's such a good player, isn't he? And he's usually he feels like a clinical player in front of goal, but it isn't happening.
He'll definitely bounce back. Like they're young players, and especially wide players, go through periods where they don't play particularly well. There's no need for a post-mortem because the career isn't dead. It's a case of it's a young player who's gone through a period last season where he was exceptional. And he was so much better. I remember that in that run of form early last season, which is much better than I ever thought he was, especially his ball carrying ability. Like he burst onto the scene as this kind of young striker who was scoring headers in the cup. and suddenly he plays as this incredible inside forward, still with that goal output, but also able just to get on the ball and carry Arsenal forward so many times. And naturally, it's very hard for players, especially wingers, to reproduce that kind of form consistently. So it's a dip in form. As I said, I think not having a left-footed player playing on the left-hand side, let alone one as good as progressing the ball as Xhaka, obviously makes an impact as well. So yeah, I mean, it's a matter of time, but maybe now, rather than Arteta doing what he seems to do, which is basically just stick to the formula, stick with what he believes the best team is, rather than looking to kind of change. It was interesting how early in the season, Jim, when he moved White into centre back, and he gave that interview where he spoke about how he takes a different road back from training every day when he, depending on the traffic and the time. And there was a kind of an analogy for, there are different teams for different opposition. But ever since then, it's basically felt like he's put the same team out every game. And maybe now is the time to actually look to change it and take Martinelli out and bring someone else back in order to nurture his development. Because at the moment, it's not really happening for him.
That's a lovely segue that you've done there, George, lining me up nicely for the next section. So, Who Scored? The boffins at Who Scored have put together Arsenal's most used 11 here in a 4-3-3 system. You could probably both reel off the 11 players, but I'll do it anyway. It's Raya, Ben White, Saliba, Gabriel, Zinchenko, Declan Rice, Ødegaard, Kai Havertz, Saka, Jesus, and Martinelli. Only 3 players in that team, or for Arsenal this season, have got a better Premier League rating according to Who Scored than they did last season. Can you name the 3 players? Some of them are marginal, I will say. Sorry,
Declan Rice?
Declan Rice is one. He's up by 0.17.
Saliba?
No, Saliba's actually down.
Havertz? He's not up.
Havertz is down as well, 0.13.
Ødegaard?
Nope, down, 0.16.
Gabriel?
Gabriel is up by 0.02.
Zinchenko?
Nope, down 0.06.
I'm terrible.
Down 0.47.
Jesus?
White?
Down, no. I mean, the only player you haven't named, I think now, Saka.
Saka's up this season.
Saka's up.
Yeah,
0.11. Actually, I don't know whether you were on the show or not, Jonathan, but we did say a few weeks ago that Saka's rating has improved season upon season. So if you had been on for that one, you would have known. But perhaps that was one where you weren't here. I mean, in the visual, there's a lovely game of Connect 3 going on with Gabriel, Declan Rice, and Saka going down on the diag. But yeah, you surprised with any of them? I'm surprised that Gabriel's up and Saliba's down, Jonathan.
I mean, presumably none of these are by huge margins.
No, it's the biggest drop off actually is Jesus 0.55 and Raya 0.47.
But Jesus scored a load of goals early on last season, and goals do get you good ratings.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense in that they've got a lot fewer points.
Yeah,
per game.
Riding high, weren't they?
They got fewer points per game at this, now than they had over the whole of last season. So I guess from that point of view, they are probably playing worse. And certainly the first half of last season, there were a few games where they really cut loose and won games by sort of 3 or 4. Whereas this season, I mean, there've been a couple. Was Sheffield United? Was it they beat 5-0?
And Nketiah scored a hat trick like that.
Yeah, I think they won 4-0 away at Bournemouth. So they have been the odd one, but I just don't think they've been anywhere near as attacking this season, which I think is a deliberate ploy. I think they've tried to tighten up, and maybe that sort of thing is harder to reflect in stats.
Yeah, what's their biggest worry right now, George? Is it goals?
Yeah, I mean, I think the form is just the biggest worry. Like, I don't necessarily think it's purely about a goal scoring ideal, and I know that there's all this talk about Arsenal needing a striker, but they're not going to get one, are they?
They're not going to get a striker.
Well, it doesn't look like it, no. And I think there are a lot of good attacking sides. Like, I don't think in this day and age, in modern day football, you do not need an Erling Haaland. You don't need a Lewandowski in order to be a great team, because they've got players across the park who are obviously capable of doing that. And we saw that last season. Like, they were a brilliant side last season who could sweep teams away, scoring loads of goals. But as soon as you go hit a bad run and your main striker is Gabriel Jesus, who we know, whilst he's good for some goals, is never going to be prolific, because there's loads of parts of his game that he does that aren't necessarily, that to the detriment of him being in the right place to score goals. So it's just a bad run. And I think we're going to learn a lot about Mikel Arteta in the next couple of weeks as to how he approaches this in order to correct it, because it's not just in the league. We saw them to be knocked out 2-0 by Liverpool in the Cup when Liverpool didn't really play a particularly strong side. It's in itself, for a club like Arsenal, who have a great record in the Cup, and for Arteta, who winning the FA Cup was such an important moment in the infancy of his Arsenal management career, was a massive blow. So, goals are an issue, but not necessarily in the sense that I think there's anything they have to do in the transfer market to correct it. It's just work out what is going on and how they can return to former form.
The only plus from that cup defeat is that it means they've got basically one game in 3 weeks. So they had last weekend off.
That much in 3 weeks.
They have next weekend off, so they do have a bit of a break. So if it is largely driven by fatigue, this is an opportunity to get over that.
Well, we saw if Mikel Arteta was tired, he's been getting his protein, hasn't he? With Salt Bay. Eating the steak. That was strange, one of the strangest things I've ever seen on social media, actually. And I've seen a lot of strange things on social media over the years. Let's talk about the visitors then. Crystal Palace. They beat Brentford in their last Premier League game, but Jonathan Hodgson, it feels like he won't be here next season. Where do you think Palace do go from here? I'd have thought earlier, and see what you think of this, that Southgate could leave England after the Euros and take over at Palace. Is that beyond the realms of possibility? No,
that seems fairly plausible. I mean, are we sure that Hodgson's going in the summer?
I think he probably will. I don't know anything. I'm not in the know on this kind of thing. It just feels like a logical conclusion to his time.
Well, maybe. I sort of think there's a negativity around Palace at the minute that maybe isn't entirely justified by performances. If you think this season they've been without Eze and Olise for long periods. The last 4 games, 2-2 draw away at City. All right, slightly fortuitous, but it's a point at City, which is a great result. 1-1 draw at home to Brighton, which is a decent result. Lose 2-1 at Chelsea, but a little bit unlucky in that game. And then they beat Brentford. So it's a tough run of fixtures are on. This sort of sense that Hodgson's been ushered inevitably to the door, and I'm not sure entirely buy it. I mean, I think if Steve Cooper's available and wants to go, then they certainly should think about doing that. And I don't know whether Cooper would want to go straight back into a job, whether he'd sort of say, well, I'll come in the summer, but I want a break. I think there's a danger when managers don't take a break, when they just sort of rush straight into jobs, as say Dean Smith did. That I think those rebound jobs are never great. But I don't think there's any inevitability about Hodgson leaving. I mean, they won at Old Trafford this season. I know a lot of teams win at Old Trafford this season, but for Palace, that's a memorable result. I think that they're doing okay.
I think the issue is that they'd have to give him a new contract. He signed a 1-year deal last summer, and the way that the reason why Hodgson, I think, often was celebrated when he signed that last summer was because he was perceived to have saved them, and that was, you had to reward him with a new contract for that. I think the old issues, and they did it in that ridiculous style where suddenly they turned into this bizarre gung-ho side that we didn't really anticipate that Hodgson was going to oversee. But this season they reverted back to their normal means, and whether or not the grass is always green on the other side, like a lot of Palace fans feel like there is a quite obvious ceiling under Hodgson, and that ceiling is somewhere around 13th, 14th. Now, if they roll the dice, as they nearly found out last season, it might end up in relegation. And I struggle to see Hodgson in this era where the gap between the Championship and the Premier League, both in terms of finances and quality, is so big, as we're finding out every season. I struggle to see Palace ever getting relegated under Hodgson. But if they do take a chance and employ someone with a more expansive style, then that comes into the rearview mirror. But they could also do a Brighton or a Brentford, where they could try and elevate themselves, because their recruitment is very good. So, because there isn't going to be any great escape this season, I struggle to imagine that Palace are going to give Hodgson a new contract, probably, unless they try and find another manager and can't find one, and then they turn back to Roy to steady the ship again.
George says about recruitment being good, Jonathan, but they have spent £26 million on a player that we haven't seen this season. If I was to bump into Matheus Franca in the street, I don't think I'd know. I don't think I know what he looks like. Been given very little opportunity since he's joined, Jonathan. And Palace aren't in a position where they can spend £26 million on a footballer and not play them, surely.
Yeah, it's all a bit odd, that signing. I mean, he is young. He's 19, isn't he? He'd only played 12 games or started 12 games for Flamengo. So I guess the sense is he's just not quite ready yet. But that's a lot of money for a club like Palace to spend
for 12 games as well.
Yeah, on a player who he hasn't started, has he? He hasn't started the league game. I think 5 sub appearances in the league. I guess if you're looking for reasons to be frustrated with Hodgson, I think he often is quite reluctant to take gambles on young players. So yeah, I mean, it might be that in a year or two he's adapted and acclimatized, and it turns out to be great business. But at the minute, it does look, it does look like it probably wasn't worth it. Having said that, I think the worst thing you can do if a player arrives and you know he's not ready is to chuck him in.
Yeah, that's fair.
Don't throw him to the wolves. You're better off sort of protecting him, nurturing him, letting people sort of forget about him, and then next season maybe he comes through a bit more.
Should we do some good news for Crystal Palace, George? You'll like this. The good news for Crystal Palace is that they have the best player in the Premier League at the moment across the last 6 games, according to
Hodgson Edouard.
Not your favourite striker. No, it's actually Michael Olise, raised in the EFL, as we know you always love, George. He is brilliant.
But he is out, isn't he? Hasn't he got a thigh injury?
I don't think that stops you being in the top of the form.
No, it's not. My point is, it's not good news.
It's good news for him to be top of the form rankings. It's not good.
Yeah, but it's bad news that he then can't play when he's absolutely at the peak of his powers.
That's not great. Obviously, him not being there for the game, he's a great. But it's good that he has come back to form. This injury won't keep him out for a long time. I don't think. But he is.
I don't know. Hodgson was talking quite negatively about it.
Oh, okay.
So I have no idea. But
how much a player of this is the fact that Manchester United is seemingly pretty keen on recruiting him. It's no surprise to me that.
Don't go there.
Well, it's no surprise that for the first time in, however long, there seem to be some quite intelligent people at Manchester United, and the first player that the new era is linked with is Olise, because he is just incredibly good. There's no denying that he has to add some kind of end product, which we don't see often enough. Although I do think his delivery from wide is very good. I also think when you are playing for Crystal Palace and your manager is as pragmatic as Hodgson is, and with Eze being injured for most of the season, teams basically know that everything's going to have to go through Olise from an attacking point of view. And it means he also gets on the ball in really deep areas, which doesn't really help his output either. But he's brilliant. He's so talented. His ball striking is incredible, both in terms of delivery and shooting. He is just a vibrant joy to watch. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see where he does go next, because I can't imagine he'll still be at Palace at the end of the summer window.
No, did them a favour by signing a new contract last summer. Kind of protected the value and got rid of that pesky release fee that was in his contract. Do you want to hear some bad news for Crystal Palace, Jonathan? Olise is top of the form rankings. That's bad news there, isn't it?
Well, it's bad news that he's injured. Yeah,
I didn't know he was injured. He's not in the running order, and I'm not privy to this information like you. I didn't know, but. Well done to him. He's a great footballer. They want him back as soon as possible. Let's do some predictions then for this one. George, I'll come to you first. Arsenal Crystal Palace prediction. Don't know why I feel the need to tell you the fixture. We've just been talking about it for 20 minutes.
2-0 Arsenal.
2-0 to Arsenal. Jonathan, Arsenal Crystal Palace prediction, please.
2-0 to Arsenal.
And I have gone for 2-1 to Arsenal. Arsenal to hit the back of the net.
Why haven't you read out last week's scores, Dan?
We haven't got to that point yet, George. Okay, I can do it now if you'd like me to. I've got it here in front of me. Shall we do it? So last week's scores, Jonathan, you got 6 points. George Elek, you also got 6 points, and then I got 2 points. So it was a really good week. Well, it's not even a great week for you two either. Really, is it 6 points?
There are only 5 games, weren't there?
Oh yeah, that's quite good. I forgot there was only 5 games. Yeah, well done to you. 5 games, 6 points. I got a pitiful 2 points. I'm surprised I got that much, to be honest. When I did have a look on the first round of games, I was like, oh dear. I think I got the Villa drawing was one of the ones that I got. But yeah, my lead has been cut. I'm on 132 points, but Jonathan now on 115. George on 108. He's starting to feel a little bit precarious at the top for me here. A little bit worried about this prediction league, because we know that it means absolutely everything. Shall we move on to the second? I had to take a breath then. I've been talking for too long. Didn't put any full stops in my mouth. Let's look at Bournemouth against Liverpool next, Len. And let's talk about the tallest player in the Premier League, Jonathan. Solanke. Heard that joke the other day. Made me laugh. Like that? Happy with that?
No.
No, I didn't like that one. I thought that would get a bit of a better reception than it did get.
Who is the tallest player in the Premier League?
Dan Bardell?
Got a bit.
What about
The Brighton keeper? They got Brighton got a keeper that's 6'6", if I imagine.
Yeah, I think outfield. The keepers don't count.
what do you call him? The Serbian lad up front for Wolves.
He's gone. He's gone. So he's no longer.
Oh, is he gone?
Yeah, he's gone back to Germany. He's gone to
No longer at all.
Frankfurt, I think. So maybe he's must be Dan Burn then.
Maybe, yeah.
I can't think of anyone else. The Solanke joke didn't go brilliantly. I won't be using that one on Sky Sports News over the next couple of days. I've read the room. That one won't be getting broadcasted again. But a brilliant player, Jonathan. Someone I've always thought has got the kind of everything you would want from a modern day striker in terms of physicality, in terms of pace, and he's added finishing to his game now. Producer Dan Rollinson laughed at the Solanke joke. He's just informed me in the chat, so that's good news. Maybe it's back. Who knows? Maybe I will use it tomorrow. But yes, Solanke, Jonathan, just a brilliant striker and in a good run of form.
Yeah, I think we've been waiting for this for a while. That when he was at Liverpool, when he was winning whatever youth tournament that was, he won with England. You sort of thought, yeah, he's got everything, but it's taken a while for him to really find form. But I was at the game where Bournemouth beat Newcastle, and I think he scored 2 that day, but he was brilliant. He led the line, was running in behind, pulled Newcastle this way and that. He's got 12 in 19 this season. But I think it's also only fair to point out it's because of the system that they're playing that Semenya and Tavernier wide are creating opportunities. The fact that they've got Kluivert or Billing playing just behind him, he's getting people there to support him, which maybe hasn't been certainly in the Gary O'Neill. That was not how they played. Semenya obviously is away at the Cup of Nations, so I guess Sinisterra will probably play. But yeah, Solanke, he's confident, and he looks like he's finally producing the sort of football that we always thought he could.
And he's 5th. I'm looking at the wrong thing here. Where am I? I'm having a nightmare here. He's 4th, in the 2020 in the form rankings over the last 6 games. There's some good names in this list, actually. Because what I like about this list of the form rankings is a lot of my favourite players to watch at the moment are in there. So Pedro Porro, Trent,
what a judge you
Foden, Kudus. I like Cunha at Wolves as well, I've got to say.
All of these players are injured. Kudus is injured. Trent is injured.
Well, it's the rankings, though. They might be injured, but across the last 6 games, which is what the rankings is.
Have we cracked the algorithm? As soon as you get injured, you get bumped up.
Yeah. Shall I read the top 10? I'll do the top 10. It's Elise well ahead with 8.13 at the top.
Broken.
Yeah. Trent is 2nd. Kudus is 3rd.
Broken.
Solanke's 4th. Solanke's
not broken yet.
5th, Son, who's away. 6th, Phil Foden, he's fit at the moment. 7th is Pascal Gross. 8th is Pedro Porro. 9 is Matheus Cunha. And 10, who I've got to admit, I never thought I'd see the day, Ross Barkley balling out in the Premier League for Luton. I thought he was finished when I watched him be dross for Villa in the main. A lot of players in there as well, George, that have come through the AFL or had stints at the AFL as well. Solanke in there, he's had I say lots, there's 2. Solanke and Elise are the 2 that have had stints. But that's an interesting list. And Solanke in 4th, like Jonathan says, it's taken some time, but it does feel like it's all coming together, George.
He's 26 years old now. I think
I thought he was younger than that.
He made one England appearance, I think in 2000. It was a long time ago. 2018, I think he made his England debut in the summer that he moved from Chelsea to Liverpool. Yeah,
it's Gareth.
Yeah, I think
taking risks.
Gareth just loves a big transfer. He's a player who, and I think this is often the case. Not to bring this to EFL focus, but if you look at Leeds this season, you've got Crescencio Somerville, who was basically incapable of saving Leeds at the back end of last season. Didn't really look too dangerous. Got Jorginho Rutter, who came in for 30 million and basically couldn't get a game. I have no doubt that the best possible thing for their development has been this season with Leeds now, where Somerville will either be playing for Leeds in the Premier League next season or will get a move to a club who are either in European competition or around that level. And Rutter, exactly the same. He's an unbelievable player. We're now seeing it because he's playing regular minutes at a lower level. And Solanke is exactly the same. Like, the best thing that happened to Dominik Solanke was going down to the Championship and playing consistent minutes, being one of the best players on the pitch at that level, dominant physically, scoring goals at a senior level, having not really done it. We know he scored a lot of goals for Chelsea youth teams, but was the best thing for him. And he came back to the Premier League a much more well-rounded striker, someone who had however many goals in that season under his belt, and now playing for a manager in Iraola who has basically built a system and a team around creating chances for him. He's thriving. I think he's a really interesting proposition, and you can always get a little bit trapped by signing players after a good scoring spree, but I think he's done it now over a long enough period of time that I think he'd be a really good player to play for a good side. And I'm not saying Bournemouth aren't a good side, but I think if he went into an Arsenal or went into a top team and was able to play the similar role he's playing now, I see no reason why the goals wouldn't flow. He's a proper out-and-out goal scorer and a top player.
Yeah, Jonathan, Bournemouth are an interesting side. I always think they've only lost 1 of their last 9, and they've won 7 of those 9 as well. Got off to a tricky start under Iraola, but they stuck with him. There was a bit of pressure at one point, actually, that Bournemouth are going to be down there. They should change manager, but they stuck with him. Obviously, believed in his methods and what he was trying to do. What's a good season for them? 10th, 9th?
Oh, top half I think would be amazing for them. Yeah. I don't think he's talking about European qualification yet. So yeah, 9th or 10th is. I mean, especially given the way they started. I mean, the thing is, I feel like I keep repeating this, but they didn't play badly those first few weeks of the season.
Tough fixtures as well.
They just, partly they've had, the fixtures was very, front loaded, but they lost a lot of games by a single goal, or they drew games that they could have won. It was only really the 3-0 defeat at Everton where they looked poor. Even losing 4-0 at home to Arsenal, they weren't bad in that game. So I sort of had. I mean, you never know with a run like that, because it can be that players will lose faith in the manager, or the manager loses faith in himself, and confidence wanes, and then the poor results spiral into poor performances. But my sense was always that actually the performances were getting better as they began to understand what Iraola wanted, and the likelihood was always when they hit that run of easier fixtures in the second half of the first half of the season, that they would get results. So I think they've actually played pretty well all season. I certainly don't think relegation is an issue at all now, unless it turns out that they're going to get dock points as well. But it doesn't seem to be them. So yeah, they should be comfortably away from relegation, and then maybe they can look at getting in the Conference League.
I mean, everyone's going to get dot points. So if they lose -10, I imagine there'd be a few others that would lose -10 as well. George, talk to me about Alex Scott, another player who did well in the EFL. There seems to be a bit of a theme with the show this week. I've got to be honest, I don't think I've seen him play live for Bournemouth yet. I've only seen him on Match of the Day. Tell me about him. Let me learn some things about him.
Yeah, I think when you look at players recruited out of the Championship, there are some who you think might do okay. But it's a bit of a punt, and then there's a few, Watkins being one, Eze being another, Olise being another, Bowen being another, where they when they're playing the Championship, there weren't flashes of brilliance. It was, this guy is quite clearly better than most other people on this pitch. I mean, Scott, he played a range of roles for a Bristol City side that weren't necessarily the best. He started out often playing as a kind of an attacking player, but he found his groove in central midfield. And his ability on the ball, his ball carrying in particular through the middle of the park, but also his tenacity, where he is he's a pretty small kid, but he's so willing to get stuck in. He's got that combination of being technically one of the best players on any pitch he's on, but also not shrinking and not so happy to engage in the physical side of things. He's one of those where I can't really work out why there weren't teams such as, Arsenal's or Tottenham's who are after him. But maybe for his development, it's the best thing that he's gone to a side in Bournemouth where he'll get minutes. I've seen in the script, it says, is he a future England international? Like, there's just no question. Like, he'll play for England in the next 2 years without a doubt. And you're already seeing Bournemouth fans now. And it's quite rare you see this these days. Bournemouth fans now are just like, let's just enjoy him whilst he's here, because he's not going to be here very long.
Yeah, he's brilliant in Football Manager. Jonathan loves it when I talk about Football Manager. He's been a player I've signed on Football Manager for years and years, but I've not really seen 90 minutes of him, which I'm disappointed in myself. So I'll make an effort to see 90 minutes of him.
I don't know, has he played 90 minutes yet?
Well, he would have done for Bristol, wouldn't he?
Because he was, I've just
never seen him play 90 minutes. So
what was also incredible is that from the amount of minutes he's played in his career already, he's played 6,800 league minutes in his career. Which is mega for a 20-year-old.
Yeah, it really is. Let's throw something. I'm going to throw something out here that I was thinking about while you were talking. Who's the best ever player to sign from the EFL into the Premier League? Who's the best ever signing?
Direct.
Yeah, like what you just mentioned, Bowen, etc. That kind of
into the Premier League, because I mean, obviously Bellingham's the one.
Premier League only. I'm fed up with Bellingham just winning everything and being the best at everything. Let's let someone else have something. Tim Cahill. Tim Cahill was a good one. Longevity.
Better than that, can't we?
He was just
a great question.
Thank you.
Because I'm so focused on the more recent ones. I mean, I think Watkins is obviously got to be up there.
I'm happy with that. Let's end the show.
Huh?
I'm happy with that. Let's end the show.
And obviously, you don't mean a player who's played in the Premier League, got relegated, and then been signed. You mean somebody who
can't
like Bowen, they've made the step up
to
the Premier League. I think Tim Cahill's probably in the conversation, you know.
Yeah, he's at Millwall, wasn't he? And then Everton.
He never played Premier League, had he? And then he went to Everton and was there for a long time. Robbie Keane?
Yeah.
So he didn't go direct, did he? He went to Coventry. There's a show in this, George.
Did he go to Inter?
Yeah, I'm going to think.
Did he?
He went
Wolves,
Wolves,
Coventry,
Inter, Leeds, Spurs, and then everywhere else. I reckon you could do a podcast on that, George. I
can have a think. It's good.
Nice podcast idea there.
It is good.
You and Ali. I'm creating ideas for you and Ali.
I think there's got to be like a proper superstar. I'm just trying to think who it is.
I don't think there is, because I would say biasly that the best player to play in the Championship would be Jack Grealish, but then he's already played Premier League.
I would say Kyle Walker's got to be up there as well.
So that's a shout. I can get on
into Spurs and City.
I can get on board via a loan spell at Villa Park. Don't forget that pivotal in his career. That was. I like that. I think that's probably a decent shout considering how decorated he is as well.
Where was Trippier before Spurs by a similar
Burnley.
But in the EFL though, did he?
In the Championship, yeah.
He went Championship, played Premier League for Burnley, then went on to Spurs from there. But he went Man City, but I don't think he ever played for Man City. It's a good conversation
Adam
anyway.
The next one, by the way.
Pardon?
Adam Orton's the next one.
I don't know who he plays for. George, I'm really embarrassing myself.
Plays for Blackburn, and he's mega. He's been linked to Spurs recently. He's just an unbelievable player, like central midfield player. Again, just an unbelievable passer, great passing range, fairly tenacious as well. But when you watch him play football in the Championship, especially when Blackburn have the ball, he's clear. Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting conversation anyway, one we can think about, and we'll come back next week and maybe reconvene with some different answers. Let's talk about Liverpool then. Good start to life without Salah, Jonathan. They beat Arsenal in the FA Cup. Really good game. That was really entertaining spectacle, I thought. So they've shown that they can win without him, but they're now without Trent and Szoboszlai as well. So a few absentees for Liverpool, but you kind of get the feeling that, like all season really, they'll make it work.
Well, they've got a big problem at fullback now. I mean, if given that they don't have their first choice right back, their second choice right back is covering the fact that the two left backs aren't there. So does Conor Bradley play at right back?
Is Timish due back? I've got a feeling he's due back.
Is he back? Okay, well, if he's back, obviously Joe Gomez could switch across.
Yeah.
But how fit he is, even if he is back, whether he can last the full game, given the physical demands on fullbacks in that Liverpool team. Yeah, that is. I mean, Conor Bradley looked very good. What we saw of him after 15 minutes at Arsenal.
Yeah.
Endo's away as well, so there's issues in midfield. I mean, they do have midfielders. I mean, they can play McAllister deep. I guess Elliott on the right and Jones on the left. We've got Gravenberch. So there are options there. In some ways, Salah, although clearly a brilliant play, he's the most easily replaceable because they've got such strength up front. They can play Gakpo over there. So I think that's or Jota. Yeah, so there's plenty of options in the forward line. Yeah, it's Alexander-Arnold. It's the big issue if depending on Tsimikas' fitness.
You'll like this next graphic, Jonathan, because we've got the Liverpool top 10 performers from the season, but some of them have got Salah's got a plane next to him, which means he's away. And some of them have got a little injury graphic as well next to them on this one. So three of Liverpool's top 4 rated players so far this season are absent: Salah, Trent and Szoboszlai. a 3 of the 4. Van Dijk's the second highest rated for Liverpool with 7.30. So, that you take 3 of your 4 highest rated players out of any side, George, and it could be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's always going to be an issue, but it's how you deal with the strength and depth, as Jonathan says, and it feels like they've got some to cope with most. But I mean, it's easy for us to sit here and say Salah comes out, you got Gakpo, you got Elliott, but I mean, this is Mo Salah, so there's always going to be a massive drop off. But the interesting thing for me, I mean, I think if Szoboszlai wasn't out, I think they'd be better able to cope with the loss of Trent, because I think when I think Trent's really good form in the second part of the season has been at the detriment of Szoboszlai, who's had to kind of adopt a more central position rather than that kind of playmaker role on the right hand side of the 3, which I think is impacting his performances a bit. But yeah, I mean, we saw Liverpool put in a great performance at Arsenal last time out, not without a great team. So this is a pretty awkward game for them. It's a game where Bournemouth will certainly fancy their chances given the players that are out.
Let's talk Darwin Nunez, Jonathan. I don't know if you remember this, but last season we had quite a brutal conversation with him on this show, saying that for 85 million, you want a bit more from your striker. It wasn't with him; he wasn't on the show, no. But we had a conversation about him. Sorry, for 85 million, basically, you want a bit more. We said you want more of the finished article, but he's approaching double figures for goals and assists now across all competitions this season. Jonathan, he's not. I don't think he's the finished article by any stretch of the imagination, and that's what we were saying. For 85 million, you probably want a bit more. But are you seeing different things this season that you like more compared to last?
No, but I think maybe we just accept this is what he is. I mean, I think in the league he's got 5 goals, 6 assists, which is okay.
Yeah.
They generate enough chances that it hasn't really looked like costing them yet. The danger is that in a key game, say the home game against City, it's 0-0, 2 minutes to go, and Szoboszlai does something brilliant, lays the ball through. Do you want Nunez being the man running on to that chance? Well, probably not, and that is an issue. So I can accept the argument that the chaos that he generates is one of the things that leads to chances, and you have to accept that. Chance creation is something he does very well. Chance execution is something he's less good at, but the two sort of balance out. But I do think there's a danger that there is a really big, really crucial chance comes his way, and you wouldn't fancy him.
Was it against Bournemouth in the Cup where he made that horrendous touch and the crowd went, way, and then he scored an absolute world. That probably sums him up as a player. He's from the sublime to the ridiculous with Nunez. But, whatever we say about Salah, George, even if he's having a bad game, he's always in the goals. So they can kind of do with someone taking over that. Maybe that player is Jota, because I feel like he's always in the goals when he does play. But they could do with Nunez taking some of these chances in the next few weeks, because they haven't got time to mop this stuff up.
Surely he's going to. I just find it impossible that this guy is. I mean, I love him personally. I think it's got to be. I mean, I feel like I've been sitting here for the last year and a half saying it's a matter of time. But the fact that
you love Oddison Edouard as well, George. Though I don't know whether we can take your striker opinion seriously.
Very, very similar players.
How do you feel about Timo Werner?
Differently. I'm not as big a fan of him. But there is.
You look a little bit like Timo Werner, George. I think there's a resemblance.
I think you've said that before.
I don't think I have. It wasn't me.
Someone else has.
Must be another excellent presenter that you do a podcast with.
Or Ali Maxwell. I don't think so.
It
was with Darwin. He's got the goals, and you don't score 26 Liga NOS goals if you are going to consistently miss chances like that.
You can say about Werner, though. You don't score 28 Bundesliga goals if you're going to miss chances like that.
Yeah, and I kind of think that there's probably something in that. I mean, with Werner, as we spoke about last week, it feels like he is, as a player, just was shot to pieces by the pressure and what happened at Chelsea. I don't get that impression with Darwin at all. He feels like he's quite resilient, if anything. It doesn't seem to me like he's someone who retreats into his shell in the face of pressure. But he's just, I just can't work out how someone as good at so many things as he is so incapable of taking the easy chances that would make him, that would turn him from being a frustrating but effective player to an elite striker.
Can someone tell me what a Liga NOS goal is, please?
What's that?
Is that what it's called? Liga NOS?
Yeah.
Sounds like a dessert. I'll have a chocolate ganache. I've never heard it called that in my life. How do you spell that?
Liganos.
What? Ligue ganache. What does it mean?
Don't know.
Okay, but I've never ever heard it called that. Ever. Fantastic. You learn something every week at the moment.
I like you were trying to embarrass me, and
no, I wasn't. I knew it. I didn't think you just made up a word. I knew it meant something, but I'd never ever heard it called that. That's fascinating stuff. For me, that is a Ligue ganache goal. Brilliant. Right, then let's do our predictions for Bournemouth against Liverpool. Then again, I feel the need to tell the fixture that we've been talking about for 20 minutes. Jonathan?
2-1 to Liverpool.
2-1 to Liverpool. I have gone for 3-1 to Liverpool. George?
2-2.
2-2. And of course, now this would probably be the time that we go through how we got on with our predictions last time. But George was so eager to do it earlier on in the show. We haven't had the chance to do it in its usual slot. So let's do the rest of our predictions then. Big game on Saturday tea time is Brentford against Forest. I'll go first this time. I've gone for Brentford 2, Forest 1. The return of Ivan Toney to galvanise them. George?
1-1.
1-1. Jonathan?
1-0 to Brentford.
1-0 to Brentford. Sheffield United against West Ham. I don't know why I've put this down. George?
Well, I answered yesterday and I put Sheffield United 1, West Ham 2, and then I watched the FA Cup game against Bristol City, and I'd now like to say Sheffield United 3, West Ham 0. But sadly, we have to stick with what we put the first time. So 2-1 Hammers.
Well, yeah, I did it before the game as well. I went for Sheffield United 1, West Ham 1. Jonathan?
1-0 to West Ham.
1-0 to West Ham. And then finally, Brighton against Wolves. Jonathan?
2-1 to Brighton.
2-1 to Brighton. I changed last second. I was going to go for that. I went for 2-2. George?
Yeah, I got 2-1 Brighton as well.
2-1 to Brighton. So that leaves us then to do our treble in association with Oddschecker and most of the time Bet MGM, who I'm sure will come in about 30 seconds. Jonathan? You haven't got an away win, have you? You said to
yeah, I've got 2 away wins.
Oh, what did you didn't have a draw?
I don't have any draws.
Okay, well,
why didn't Jonathan take the away win?
Jonathan take the away win. Then George, what do you want to take?
I don't mind.
No, you choose. You choose, Tamer.
I'll take a draw.
You take the draws, which means I'll pick a home win. So it feels like I should just go for Arsenal against Palace, shouldn't I? I'll just go for Arsenal Palace.
Okay. That's 3-1, 1-3.
Yep, George, draw.
Jonathan? I'll do the draw. I've got Brentford Forest as the draw. 11-4.
Brentford v Forest. Okay. And then Jonathan, away win, please.
Which is longer, West Ham or Liverpool?
West Ham.
I go for that one. West Ham to win a Sheffield United.
Jared Bowen back has to be good news, hopefully, for West Ham. Oh my gosh. Guess who's top price? 20.5 to 1.
That's a good price.
MGM.
That is a really good price.
20 to 1, the treble. Arsenal to win, Brentford Forest draw, West Ham away win. It is as short as...
How do these people make money?
Bet MGM.
People like me. People like me who never get it right.
I think they try and get people to sign up by being the best price. It'll be interesting. I mean, they've only recently launched. Will they still be best price in a year?
Okay.
Right. I will say they've spent a lot on advertising.
Chris Rock.
But he's everywhere.
But if we got BetMGM to sponsor it, then Chris Rock would come on the pod.
I'm going to ping him a message saying we're talking about you every single week.
Him and Darwin Nunez. It's as short as 16 to 1 with another firm on the Oddschecker grid. So yeah, I mean, if you use Oddschecker, you get not 16 to 1, but over 20 to 1.
I'd be really interested to hear what Chris Rock has to say about who was the best player to sign from the EFL into the Premier League. I'd be really interested in his
I don't want to lose my fee. I think we should discourage outsiders.
He'll be coming on. He doesn't need the money. He'll be coming on out the goodness of his heart. We need to talk Premier League with us. That's what I would have thought.
Yeah, that's how celebrities operate. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely at that level as well. Chris Rock. He's trying to rebuild a little bit as well after he got slapped in the face as well, isn't he? By Will Smith. Trying to rebuild his career. After that, I'm sure he'll be okay though. Right, let's go. Let's not talk about Chris Rock. Thank you ever so much, both of you, for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure as always. Do all the good stuff that helps the podcast grow. Subscribe, like, comment on wherever you are getting this podcast, whether it be audio or video. It's the game. No, it's FA Cup, isn't it? We don't do FA Cup, so we won't be back next week, but we will be back the week after, as we always are, to preview the Premier League weekend. So get subscribed with those post notifications on, so you know when the show is coming. Enjoy the staggered football at the weekend, and tell all your friends and family about the pod.